Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Welcome to today's reading from Brilliant as the Sun, a retelling of Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 5. We are going to be reading from chapter 18, Prayers by the Jambudweep Residents. Mukam karoti vachalam pangum langhayate girim yat kripatamam vande Shri Gurum Deenatarinam Parmananta Madhavam Shri Chaitanya Ishwaram Hari Om Tat Sat. Parikshit said, O great sage, you have described how Jambudweep is divided into 9 varshas. We have also heard how in the Ilavrat Varsh, Shiva worships Lord Sankarshan. Please tell us who worships which form of the Lord in the other 8 varshas. Observe, said Shukadev, circling his arm around. A magnificent temple appeared in the sky, its golden domes shimmering in the sun. Its exquisite architecture displayed many pastimes of Krishna and his incarnations. Parikshit and the sages saw a tall, regally dressed man wearing a fine silk turban adorned with gems and gold filigree approaching the temple. Similarly dressed persons flanked him as they walked through the tall, bejeweled arch leading into the inner sanctum, which was illuminated by thousands of lamps. At the end stood a magnificent altar where they all offered prostrated obeisance. On a golden dais stood a beautiful horse-headed deity of gleaming black and marble, holding the symbols of conch, lotus, chakra and club in his 4 hands. Verse 1, Shukadev said, Bhadrashva Varsha is named after its ruler, the son of Dharamraj. Just as Shiva worships Sankarshan in Ilavrit Varsha, so Bhadrashva along with his close associates and the other residents of that region worship Hayagriva, a plenary expansion of Vasudev from the Chaturvyuha. He controls religious principles and is most dear to the devotees. In full samadhi, Bhadrashva and his followers offer the Lord choice prayers. Parikshit and the sages watched as Bhadrashva and his companions bowed before the deity. Verse 2, rising to his knees, Bhadrashva said, We offer you, the Supreme Lord, our respectful obeisance. You are the source of religion and you purify the hearts of conditioned souls in the material world. Verse 3, Bhadrashva shook his head sadly. How astonishing it is that the foolish sense enjoyer fails to heed his impending death despite knowing its inevitability. He makes no preparation. If his father or son die, he simply takes their property and continues trying to enjoy material happiness, oblivious to his own approaching demise. Parikshit said, I thought Bhadrashva is a heavenly abode. Premature death does not occur in such regions. So why is he mentioning the death of a son? Shukadev smiled. A perceptive question, dear king. He is speaking about the residents of this planet, Bharatvarsha. Knowing that only on this planet is there the opportunity to attain the spiritual world, he is lamenting the foolishness of people living here. Shukadev directed Parikshit's attention back to the aerial image. Listen to the rest of their exchange, for it is full of wisdom. From the sky above, Parikshit heard Hayagriva's voice boom out. There is nothing surprising about an ignorant person ignoring his impending death. Verse 4, Bhadrashva said, O unborn Lord, even great scholars, advanced in spiritual knowledge, who know everything in the material world is perishable, are bewildered by your powerful illusory energy. Therefore, Lord, the intelligent worship you. Hayagriva smiled. You say that my illusory energy deludes even the wise? Does this mean that I too am influenced by Maya? After all, I am always associated with my material energy. Bhadrashva and his entire retinue exclaimed, Lord, the material world never affects you. They looked at each other, surprised by their spontaneous outburst. Bhadrashva continued to speak on their behalf. You are ultimately the creator, maintainer, and the destroyer of the material universe. But you remain detached from all these activities, Hayagriva said. When people work in this world, they are attached to its result. So how can I do all this and yet remain detached? Bhadrashrava said, "Nothing is astonishing for you, my lord. You are inconceivable. By your inconceivable energies, you remain aloof from your own creation. You are the ultimate cause and the active principle of everything. And yet you stand apart from it all. This not wonderful for you?" Lord Haigriva raised his right hand in the blessing, and Bhadrashrava and his associates all offered prostrate obeisance. Verse 6. Bhadrashrava turned to his associates and said, "Did you know that at the end of the last millennium, Lord Haigriva retrieved the Vedas and returned them to Lord Brahma?" "Really?" said one of them. "What happened?" "The demon Tamas, the personification of ignorance, stole the Vedas and took them down to Rasatal. Brahma beseeched Lord Haigriva for help, and he recovered them. Knowing that the Lord's will is infallible, I too also always take shelter of him." Shukadev lifted his hand, and Bhadrashrava and his associates disappeared. In their place was a dark-complexioned warrior dressed in royal robes of purple and gold, and adorned with a shining helmet studded with gems. He knelt before a powerful-looking half-man, half-lion deity holding the symbols of Vishnu in his 4 hands. Seated on a golden altar illuminated by hundreds of blazing ghee lamps, on either side of the altar stood saffron-robed Brahmins, their shaven heads adorned with Vaishnav tilak. In the vast temple courtyard were many fierce-looking warriors. Verse 7, Shukadev said, "This is King Prahlad worshipping Lord Nrsingadev in Hari Varsha. Along with his servants and family members, I shall later tell you the history of Lord Nrsingadev's appearance. Although Prahlad was born in the demonic Daitya race, he is a reservoir of virtues and a topmost devotee of the Lord. By his outstanding qualities and behavior, he delivered his family members. Hear now how Prahlad glorifies Lord Nrsingadev." Verse 8, "I offer my respects to Lord Nrsingadev, the source of all power, who possesses nails and teeth like thunderbolts. O Lord, please destroy our material desires and free us of ignorance, so that by your mercy we may become fearless in the struggle for existence in this material world." Nrsingadev said, "Should I destroy your enemies?" Verse 9, Prahlad shook his head. "No, my lord. I desire good fortune for everyone throughout the universe. I pray that those who are hateful of others become peaceful." "How will that be possible?" Prahlad smiled. "My lord, I know you are testing me. Still, as you have asked, I shall reply. Simply by engaging in the practices of Bhakti Yoga, anyone and everyone can become calm and kind toward others, even toward their enemies. Therefore, my prayer is that by your grace, everyone engages in devotional service to you in your original form as Lord Krishna, and that they attain the stage of full absorption in Krishna." Lord Nrsingadev smiled and raised his right hand in blessing. "I am pleased with your compassion for others, Prahlad, and I will fulfill your desire. Now please ask me for something for yourself. I can give you anything: wealth, power, most beautiful women, and obedient children. You have only to ask." Verse 10, Prahlad bowed his head. "Dear Lord, I pray you free me from the attraction to the prison of home, family, and wealth. Let my only attachment be to pure devotees who have pure love for Lord Krishna." Nrsingadev said, "If you have a big house and riches, you can invite my devotees to your home and entertain them." Prahlad smiled. "My lord, if they are actually self-realized, they will not be interested in lavish entertainment. Devotees with controlled minds want only the bare necessities of life. They are not interested in sense gratification. Only such persons can make rapid advancement in Krishna consciousness. Those attached to material facilities find advancement difficult." Nrsingadev said, "Tell me, Prahlad, how will you associate with my devotees?" Verse 11, "Lord, I will hear from them about your powerful activities. Thus I will soon come to understand your pastimes. Krishna is inconceivable. How do you expect to understand him? Krishna's pastimes are so powerful that simply by attentively hearing of them, one associates with him. Then the Lord cleanses all contamination in the heart, Nrsingadev said. Why associate with Krishna's devotees then? You need only visit holy places and bathe in the river Ganges and you will get the same result. That may be true, my Lord, but by such practices will purify the heart after an extended time, whereas hearing about Krishna from his pure devotees acts quickly. Therefore, what sane person will neglect associating with devotees to swiftly attain Krishna's loving service? What is so wonderful about Krishna's devotional service? Asked Nrsingadev. Why not desire something for yourself, like maybe powers or the happiness born of pious work? Verse 12. Prahlad smiled. My Lord, all the exalted qualities of the God, such as the virtuous behavior, spiritual knowledge, and the detachment manifest in one absorbed in Krishna's service, one simply working for his own benefit, cannot be truly good, even if he is adept at mystic yoga or worldly duties. Because his own concocted ideas impel him, Krishna's illusory controls him. Why is this, my dear Prahlad? Verse 13. Just as a crocodile out of the water loses its power, so the living being disconnected from Krishna cannot exhibit his true spiritual greatness. Some materialists seem to be virtuous. The so-called virtues of a non-devotee are like the temporary beauty of a youthful couple who are ephemeral. Parikshit knew this was difficult for people to grasp, but Prahlad's example was perfect. One who acted for his self-interest will show nobility only for as long as it suits his purpose. Only those who always strive to please Krishna, even at the cost of their personal comfort, can be genuinely and enduringly good. Indeed, only they understand what is good. That without pleasing the Lord there could not be any auspiciousness for anyone. The Daitya king was most intelligent. Verse 14. Prahlad turned to his many followers. O demons, please give up the so-called happiness of family life and take full shelter of Lord Nrsingadev's lotus feet, which will make you fearless. Absorption in family life is the root cause of material attachment. Insatiable desires, moroseness, anger, despair, fear, and false prestige, all of which result in repeated birth and death. The vision of Prahlad faded and was replaced with that of a majestic-looking celestial dressed in shining silk, adorned with golden ornaments and a jeweled crown, accompanied by many youthful men dressed in gold and women dressed in black. He bowed before an exquisite four-armed form of Vishnu, along with the goddess of fortune. Verse 15, Shukadev said, Behold Prajapati Samvatsara, the deity presiding over the year, and his many sons and daughters. They live in Ketumala Varsha, where they worship Lord Pradyumna, who is Cupid, along with his eternal consort, the goddess of fortune. His sons are the controlling gods of each day of the year, and his daughters of each night. There are 36,000 sons and the same number of daughters, one for each day and night of a person's lifespan. It is said that the daughters become agitated on seeing the Lord's effulgent disc weapon and suffer miscarriages. Should we take this internally? Asked Parikshit. Shukadev said, there is a deeper meaning. The fetuses represent the pleasures one enjoys at night, which are vanquished with each passing year. Verse 16, Parikshit and the sages gazed up at the vision of Lord Kamadeva, smiling and glancing playfully at the goddess of fortune, who became flushed with joy. Verse 17, Shukadev said, during the daytime Lakshmi worships her Lord along with the sons of Samvatsara, and by night with his daughters, absorbed in pure bhakti, she offers transcendental prayers to the most merciful Kamadev. Others can also offer these prayers while meditating on themselves as the maidservants of the goddess listen. Verse 18, Lakshmi's melodious voice drifted down from the sky. I offer all respect to the Supreme Lord, Rishikesh, who controls my senses and is the origin of everything. Lord, you are the master of all bodily and intellectual activity, and thus their results should be offered to you. The senses and their objects come from you, as do the necessities of life. which are your energy and not different from you. You are the vital force of everyone's mind, senses, and very life. You are not just my protector, but that of all living beings. The Vedas' purpose is to worship you, and we should all revere you. May you always show us your favor. Kamadeva took Lakshmi's delicate hand in his own and gently kissed it. Beloved, I am most pleased that you accept only me as your husband. Why do other women worship me, seeking the benediction of marrying other man? Verse 19. Lakshmi said, My lord, you are the master of everyone's senses. Women who worship you for a husband to satisfy their senses are under illusion. Such husbands cannot protect them, their families, wealth, or lives, for they are under the control of time, karma, and material nature, which are all controlled by you. Verses 20 and 21. Only one without fear, who can shelter all fearful persons, can be a true protector or husband. You alone can claim this position, and therefore those learned in the Vedas only accept you as everyone's master. They know that no one else can be a better husband and protector than you. That woman who worships you out of love, asking for nothing, has all her needs fulfilled by you, even without asking. You also satisfy those seeking worldly benefits, but eventually they suffer when their benedictions end. Therefore, the intelligent do not worship you for material gains. Verse 22. Sometimes foolish materialists worship me for wealth, strength, fame, a good wife, and other such things. Even though gods like Brahma and Shiva try to solicit my favor, I always keep you, the supreme, unconquerable Lord, in my heart. Therefore, I do not favor anyone, however great he may be, unless he serves you. Kamadev smiled. O goddess, you are most dear to me. Verse 23. Lakshmi glanced down. My lord, although I am your wife, I know you love your pure devotees more than me. That is why you place your lotus hand, which grants all benedictions, on their heads. I wish I could be so fortunate. Kamadev raised a graceful hand. You are more fortunate than anyone, for I hold you eternally on my chest. Lakshmi said, Yes, but that is not because you love me most. It is a deception. I have heard you declare your deepest affection for your pure devotees like Uddhav. You place me on your chest only to appease me, so that I do not become foolishly angry toward you. Kamadev laughed. My dear, how can you doubt my love? Of course, I cannot know this for sure, said Lakshmi. After all, you are the Supreme Lord, so no one can truly understand your motives. As the enthralled onlookers gazed upon this scene, it gradually faded and another celestial landscape appeared. Verse 24. Shukadev said, In Ramyak, the ruler is Vaivasvata Manu. Long ago, the Lord appeared to him as Matsya, and even now he worships him in pure devotion. The vision showed a fair-complexioned man of noble bearing in royal robes of blue and gold, wearing a jeweled golden necklace, dazzling golden earrings, and a gem-studded turban. He stood before a beautifully decorated Vishnu deity with a half-fish form on a magnificent altar. Folding his palms, he spoke in a deeply resonant voice. Verse 25. I offer my respects to the Supreme Lord, the personification of pure goodness. You are the origin of life, bodily strength, mental power, and sensory ability. O Lord Matsya, you are the first avatar, and I offer you my obeisance. Vaivasvata lay flat before Matsya, his arms outstretched. Matsya's voice sounded like rumbling thunder. Rise, my beloved devotee, tell me what you know about me. Verse 26. Vaivasvata knelt with folded palms. Dear Lord, as a puppeteer controls his puppets, you control the universe by establishing the rules of Varnashram Dharma. You exist within everyone's heart as a supreme witness and controller, and you are also outside of everyone. However, you are unseen even by the so-called leaders of the world. Then how can one know me? Asked Matsya. By hearing sacred Vedic mantras, replied Vaivasvata. You say I am the supreme controller, but Indra and other gods also control and protect the universe. What then is my significance? Verse 27. Vaivasvata shook his head. My dear Lord, beginning with Brahma and other gods, down to the political leaders of this world, all of them envy your authority. Thinking themselves independently powerful without you, however, they have no power to maintain anyone. You are the only real protector of all living beings. Verse 28, Almighty unborn Lord, you appeared at the end of the last millennium when great waves flooded the earth with all her herbs and plants. You roamed the seas with great speed, protecting both me and the earth planet. I saw how you maintain the universe and are the ultimate source of all life. Please therefore accept my respectful obeisance. The vision faded and a different region appeared, flanked by majestic mountains. Verse 29, Shukadev said, here in the Hiranyamaya Varsh, the Lord lives as Kurmadev, where Aryama, the leader of that region, worships him along with its other residents. A regal person appeared in this vision, ornately decorated with gold and gems, with a great sword across his back and a brilliant crown on his head. He stood before a Vishnu deity with a half-turtle form. Other celestial personalities stood around him as he offered prayers. Verse 30, my Lord, I offer you my respects in your form as tortoise. You are the reservoir of transcendental qualities, fixed in your pure goodness, without material contamination. You move through the water unseen by all and are unaffected by time. Present everywhere, you support all things. Please accept my repeated obeisance. My dear Aryama, I am a turtle. Why are you worshipping me? Worship instead the universe, which great philosophers say is actually God's form. Verse 31. Aryama, who folded his palms and bowed, my Lord, by your inconceivable material energy, you manifest the cosmos. It is not your actual form. Your spiritual energy manifests your turtle form, which is eternal, full of bliss and knowledge. Only your liberated devotees can appreciate this. Therefore, I offer you my respectful obeisance. If the universe is not my real form, then what is it? Asked Kurma. Verse 32, Aryama said, the material universe is also you because it is your energy. Everything is you, the countless forms of life, others, outer space, and all the planetary systems, the earth planet and everything within it are all but a manifestation of you. There is nothing but you. So why did you say the universe is not me? It is not your eternal form, but a temporary manifestation of your inconceivable energy, Kurma said. The varieties in the universe are many, but I am just one person. How can I be everything? Verse 33. Lord, your name, form, and the bodily features expand without limit. You are one as the cause, but the effects that emanate from you are many. However, in your incarnation as Lord Kapil Dev, you have analyzed the universe as containing 24 elements. This is the process of Sankhya, which we must learn from you, or people will remain ignorant of your spiritual form. Therefore, I offer you my most humble obeisance. Gradually, the vision of Aryama zoomed out and moved northward across Jambudweep, over the great Shringavan mountain range to the land bordered by the northern ocean. Verse 34, Shukadev said, dear king, in the far north of Jambudweep lives Lord Varah, who accepts all sacrificial offerings. There in Uttara Kuru, Mother Bhumi and the other inhabitants worship him. The vision closed in on a vast temple courtyard, its mosaic floor crowded with worshippers. At their head stood an effulgent goddess, her red sari decorated with borders of golden filigree. She wore a dazzling jewel crown, and in her two hands she held a lotus and a golden pot. Along with her many female companions, she stood before a great altar of deep blue lapis lazuli, studded with many gems. On a many-hued marble dais stood a brilliant golden deity, a jeweled helmet adorning his boar-like head, and the symbols of Vishnu held in his four hands. Nearby Brahmins were preparing to perform a fire sacrifice, with others loudly chanted Krishna's holy names. Verse 35. Goddess Bhumi's melodious voice wafted down. My lord, we offer you all respect because you are the supreme person, known by the chanting of mantra. You are the personified form of sacrifice. All sacrificial ceremonies are parts of your body, and you enjoy their results. Your body is transcendental, and sacrifice is meant to please you. You are called Triyuga because you are the visible only in three yugas and in a concealed incarnation during Kali Yuga. Varaha's sonorous voice rang out. How is it you recognize my identity and others like Hiranyaksha do not? Verse 36, Bhumi indicated the priests who were placing kindling in a pit to begin the sacrifice. Fire is always dormant in wood, but like these priests, one needs to know how to bring it forth. Similarly, my lord, you reveal yourself to those who wholeheartedly hear and chant about you. Such expert devotees can see you present everywhere, even in their own bodies, but you remain concealed to those who try to know you by material work, mental speculation, or mystic yoga. Varaha widened his lotus petal eyes. Tell me how to see me in everything. Verse 37, Bhumi said, those who absorb their minds in you by hearing about and glorifying you can see you. By purified intelligence, they see that all things in this world, the sense objects, the senses, the gods who control the senses, the body, false ego, and eternal time are all effects of your external energy. They also see you, the super soul, in the background of everything. Varaha said, I'm often asked why I created this material world which is full of suffering. My dear Bhumi, how you would answer this question? Verse 38. Lord, you do not create, maintain, or annihilate the cosmos for your own enjoyment, but to satisfy the desires of the conditioned souls. The material energy is inert and cannot do anything by itself. When you glance over it, however, it acts wonderfully, as iron moves under the influence of a magnet. Varahadev smiled. You understand me very well, my dear goddess. Verse 39, Bhumi bowed her head. My lord, I am forever indebted to you, for in this form of yours as the original boar, you rescued me from the grip of the powerful demon Hiranyaksha. After killing him, you lifted me from the bottom of the Garbhodak ocean on the tip of your tusks, just as sporting elephant plucks a lotus flower from the water. I bow before you. As Bhumi made her obeisance to Varahadev, the vision changed as the enthralled audience watched. It swept over the lands and dividing mountains of Jambudvip, passing Meru and going south, crossing the Sita river and then the Nishad and Hema ranges until it focused in on a celestial landscape, crowded with fruit-filled trees and large lakes covered in blue and white lotuses. Many powerful-looking simians moved about with their beautifully ornamented consorts. So with this, we conclude chapter 18, Prayers by the Jambudvip residents, which was another very nectarian chapter, and we will continue with our reading from chapter 19, Bharatvarsh, next time. Thank you for joining. Hari Om Tat Sat. Hare Krishna.